What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to one of my favorite videos of the year, where today I will be breaking down my top 15 wide receivers for the upcoming NFL draft. Before we do get into this player by player, I do want to have just kind of an overall discussion about the class at large. The kind of overriding narrative is that this is a down year for wide receivers, that this is a bad wide receiver draft. You know, yes and no. I think actually at the top of the draft, with the kind of top 5 or 6 names that we're going to talk about here today, I did end up liking this group more than I expected, and I guess we'll find out if I'm higher on these guys than consensus. So there are definitely guys to be had. But once you talk about the depth, I watched 27 players to get ready for this video. In that sort of late second, third, fourth round range, there's just only a handful of names. Frankly, I had the same feeling about last year's draft class as well, but I think if you go back to like 2023, 2022, this class I don't think has the depth of those groups. And being out there at the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, you kind of felt it. That kind of group of wide receivers just didn't really stand out as much. But like I said, I do think this class is perhaps a little bit better than it gets credit for, and I'm excited to talk about the guys that stood out to me. So let's go ahead and get started. With my grading scale, I actually have a 3-way tie at 13, but I do kind of give a little nod to the guys that I do slightly prefer. So call it my number 15 wide receiver here, call it my 13C wide receiver, whatever works for you. But we're going to talk about Pat Bryant out of Illinois at 15. Just to kind of piggyback off of what I just said, kind of going through these projected day 3 guys, Pat Bryant did really stand out to me. I mean, this guy is an absolute load. Not necessarily listed at it, 6'2", 208. It's obviously very good size, but some guys just carry weight differently. And watching Pat Bryant, he has exceptional play strength to him. He's not going to wow you with his speed, his burst, his routes, and all that stuff, but there was a little bit of that A.J. Brown to him. Now, obviously, I'm not saying he's going to be A.J. Brown. That's not on my pro comp or anything like that, but when you watch A.J. Brown running down the field or kind of boxing out a defender on a dig route or a slant, and defenders are trying to get their hands on him, they're trying to slow him down with contact or disrupt his hands at the catch point, and A.J. Brown can just brush him off like a fly trying to land on him. There was a little bit of that with Pat Bryant. He is just always in control down the field, and he pairs that with really good ball tracking, just the safest of hands. He only had 1 drop in his final season at Illinois, and actually pretty good body control. He can kind of contort his body and make some really tough catches down the field. He also puts his physicality to work as a run blocker, as you would expect, but not all of these big wide receivers are as consistent and as physical in the run game as Pat Bryant. A lot of coaches will really like that, and he puts it to good use after the catch as well. He's just, the play strength translates in that part of the game. He's got the contact balance. He can put on a stiff arm. So again, not the most flashy wide receiver. He's gonna have a harder time separating in the league. It's going to likely limit his upside, right? We're not talking about potential superstars here with their number 15 wide receiver, but if you're looking for a guy that could potentially compete for like a wide receiver 3 role, give you more of that physical presence to your wide receiver group, and just a kind of, great locker room presence, a physical mindset, a leadership mentality, that's all stuff that he was heavily praised for at Illinois. I think he just brings a really nice floor to the table. And if he's going to become a starter, it is important to say where he lands. Obviously, with any draft prospect is going to matter, but with Pat Bryant, it's really important because he doesn't separate. He's going to need an accurate quarterback that can kind of pin it on his back shoulder, put it in a spot where he can kind of separate before the catch, where he's really good at doing that, kind of giving those subtle push-offs to create a little bit of space before he makes the catch. But you need an accurate quarterback to do that, and you need a quarterback that can play on time. Because, when he does separate, corners are just going to, close that gap pretty quickly because he just doesn't have that pull away speed. So if you have a guy that can play on time and throw with anticipation and put that ball out there just as he's beginning on that in break, you can definitely complete passes down the field to him. So I did like Pat Bryant. I don't know how many people are going to have him in their top 15, but stood out to me. Next up, again, my 13B / number 14 wide receiver here is Jalen Royals out of Utah State, a very unique player. He's one of these wide receivers that's built like a running back at 5'11", 210 pounds. But in Utah State's case, they actually took this guy who, kind of profiles as more of a slot playmaker type of receiver at that size. And they actually mostly stuck him just out there at left wide receiver and had him run the vertical route tree. And to be honest, he made the most of it. He actually has a little bit of that like Tyler Lockett ability to just like somehow come down with these really tough catches down the field. He's really good at stepping in front of corners, kind of winning those angles or just tracking it over the shoulder through contact. So like, I see why they stuck him out there because he did make some plays for them. But I think as you project his game to the next level, it's pretty unlikely that that's where he's going to have success. Not only do you kind of typecast these guys, especially these sort of mid-round dudes, but his tape outside wasn't amazing, right? He's not a burner, I don't think. And at his size, he's strong, but he's got these short strides, and he kind of gets absorbed a lot of the times by these corners out on the outside. I don't think he's a guy that can really line up outside, stack outside corners, and be that vertical threat you're looking for. And he doesn't have that catch radius to be this great like back shoulder guy, comeback guy, stopping in the middle of the field and kind of painting this large target in the middle of zones for quarterbacks to target. Just those skills you look for in those outside wide receivers. There's a reason so many of those guys are taller. So in the case of Jalen Royals, you do project him more into the slot. And again, Utah State just didn't really use him there much at all. I even went back to 2023, and again, they basically just stuck him outside for the most part. Although in like the last 5 games of the season, something changed, and they did start to play him from the slot. He ended up going from playing like 4 or 5 snaps a game from the slot up to like 12, 13, 15 snaps from the slot. So you started to actually get a little bit of a look at what he might look like doing more of what he's going to do in the NFL. And you definitely felt encouraged there. He's a little bit behind the 8 ball in terms of the timing on two-way goes and just the overall awareness to play from the slot, obviously, because he didn't play there a ton. But I do think that's where you did start to see him separate a little bit more. I think running corners, running posts from the slots, kind of catching the ball underneath, looking like a running back, because he's 5'11", 210. That's like an average size for a running back. So he can do a lot of that slot stuff. It's just a little bit more of a projection based on how he was used at Utah State. But even then, I didn't see this tremendous athlete, this guy that's going to be just a complete nuisance in the short game where he catches it underneath and he's just constantly breaking tackles. He's good at it. I wouldn't say he's great at it. So I ended up settling with him as like an option as kind of a physical playmaking slot type. He's going to give you a chance on like slot fades and post routes from the slot to be a little bit more of a vertical presence than your typical slot wide receiver. But I just don't know that I saw a true difference maker in Jalen Royals, if I'm just being honest. My comp on him is shorter Juju Smith-Schuster and kind of the Juju that we've seen post-rookie Juju, because that was just kind of an outlier in his career. But this just kind of balanced, big, physical wide receiver that can do a lot of different stuff, but doesn't really have those standout traits to be too much of a difference maker. So an interesting player. I don't want to sell him too short. I think he can have a chance of being a kind of low-end number 3 wide receiver and provide usefulness as kind of a mid-third round pick. But just a guy with kind of a, unique skill set that's a little bit harder to project to the next level. All right, now I'm excited to talk about Kobe Hudson, my number 13 ranked wide receiver out of UCF. This was the last guy I watched, and he ended up making the top 15. He's really interesting in the sense of like, if you're looking for a 3rd or 4th round guy that could become a little bit more of an impact starter, Kobe Hudson's got some juice to him, man. I think he's one of the better route runners in this entire draft. And I actually have him tied for the highest release grade out of any player in this class in terms of getting off of press coverage. He's got excellent technique. He's got that kind of set of diamond releases where he can threaten inside and out and kind of keep you guessing all game long. And he weaponizes it to release outside, to threaten vertically, and to release inside to get open on slants and dig routes and stuff where, like I said, he's a great route runner. He has just machine gun feet. He uses shoulder fakes. He can really snap off routes and just leave corners in the dirt at the top of his route. And the most exciting thing about his route running to me is he's one of the best deep route runners I've seen in years. You don't get a ton of college prospects that really understand the nuance of how to like really manipulate corners and get open deep. Usually it's just a lot of guys running in a straight line. But Kobe Hudson uses that threat of his stop-start ability because he does beat you out throughout the course of the game on digs and hitches and slants and stuff. But he's really good at selling the idea that he's gonna run a dig or turn around on a hitch, and his shoulder fakes and the way he sells it with his hips without losing any momentum. It's incredible technique in the way he does it. So going into a league where teams are running tons of off man, cover 3, cover 4 type of stuff, that top down zone, these corners can get put in a bind. So you project this type of route running for Kobe Hudson against those types of corners, just as he did in college. He can get those guys to take a step downfield, and he can bolt behind them without losing any momentum. So even if he's not the fastest guy, which I don't think he is, I think he's got very average speed. I think he'll run kind of 4.48, 4.5 type of area. He can still threaten vertically because he is such a technically sound and deceptive route runner over the top. So in terms of separation skills, he absolutely stood out, especially compared to that kind of day 3 crop. But even against some of the guys we have yet to talk about, he can absolutely separate. Now, why does he rank 13th? He's got a ton of drops on film. He's a 5th-year player, and each of the last 4 years, he had over a 10% drop rate. And frankly, he just doesn't quite check those high-end production boxes that you want to see for these guys to feel really good about them in the top 1st or 2nd rounds. I don't think it was all his fault. Obviously, the drops held his production back a little bit, but he did deal with just horrible quarterback play in his final year. UCF rotated through 3 different quarterbacks. They all stank. There were so many plays on film where he's either not open and the quarterback's throwing it anyway, and it kind of makes Kobe look bad because he's trying to do anything to catch the pass or break up the interception, or he's wide open and the throw is just late or off target. There was a lot of that with Kobe Hudson, but you do want to see at some point in a 5-year career, you want to see that kind of breakout year where he was a star. They funneled him a lot of targets, but it just, he didn't quite clear those production thresholds to make you kind of feel better about his floor. The last thing I want to say on Kobe too that was really eye-popping is even if he had some drops, he is a hands catcher. And it always sounds silly to say that because you're like, what do you mean? They're wide receivers. Yes, they're supposed to catch the ball with their hands, but not everybody does. A lot of these guys kind of let the ball into their chest. They will use their kind of forearms a lot. Kobe does want to reach out, pluck the ball before the DB can get you, and that's great technique. Again, got to keep hitting the jugs machines and clean up the drops, but he's good at doing that, but he's really good at like high pointing the ball down the field too. I think even if I don't think he has incredible ball skills, he had some really nice like over the shoulder targets where he just knows how to win those balls. He has the ability to have those subtle push-offs right before the ball arrives, so he can create a little bit of separation before the catch as well. So that's now 2 areas of the field where he can create vertical separation outside of his speed. And then he's just good at kind of elevating, high pointing the ball with his hands. And those are high difficulty catches. Sometimes he would hit the ground and the ball would pop out. But he did have some catches on film where you're like, wow, like he can really make some tough catches down the field. So he definitely popped to me. I don't know that the NFL is going to be as high on Kobe Hudson. He's not a guy that's got a ton of hype. I don't think he got an invite to either of the 2 major showcase games. If he did, he was hurt and wasn't able to go. But I compared him to Rashad Bateman. I think the areas of the field that they win at, kind of the level of wide receiver, where I think Bateman has settled in as a really nice number 2 wide receiver for the Ravens. A guy that's dealt with a lot of drop issues throughout the years. I saw a lot of Bateman in his game, even in the way that they move with kind of the quick feet, good, not great speed. So I liked him. Obviously, just has a little bit of stuff to clean up at the next level. Before we get to my number 12 player, I just want to remind you guys to make sure you like the video if you enjoy, and make sure you subscribe. We're going to be doing positional rankings for every position in the draft. You're not going to want to miss it. I also want to take a second to remind you guys, if you enjoy my draft content, you can get even more of it and support my channel in the process over on my Patreon. You can get access to my full draft board as I complete my evaluations. So you can see not just the write-ups on these top 15 wide receivers, but the 27 that I've written up and every other position as well. Friend of the channel, Jalen's also doing some fun stuff with the top 10 players to kind of give you an interactive graphic tool. That's new this year. That's exciting. You're going to get exclusive videos too. We're going to be doing film room episodes, kind of just sitting down, watching tape on guys, can see my evaluation process a little bit. And in April, I will be doing team-specific 7-round mock drafts for all 32 teams. So there's a ton of great content on Patreon. It is the best time to get signed up there, support my channel, and of course, get even more draft content. But now let's get to my number 12 wide receiver here. I would say the hardest evaluation in this draft, Trey Harris out of Ole Miss. Just kind of a lot of missing items in his evaluation is the way I would put it with Trey Harris. I like a lot of the flashes we saw. Big, fast, SEC wide receiver out of Ole Miss. We've seen this before, right? A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. There's an aesthetic to it that you like. He can win down the field. He's got really some just sensational catches on tape. He attacks the ball really well. Long, outreached arms, plucks the ball with his hands, uses his size well to win body positioning. He had a contested catch win rate of 61.5% in his final season at Ole Miss. I think he even showed some savviness in his routes too, like some of these double moves, kind of throwing corners off. A little bit of the stuff we just talked about with Kobe Hudson was there with Trey Harris. So again, there's a lot to like. I think he beats press coverage too with his burst and his size. So the potential to be a vertical threat is absolutely there. My high-end comp on him is Mike Williams. Had a great career as a perimeter X receiver in the league. I don't think that's out of the range of possibilities for Trey Harris. But the reason he comes in at number 12 for me is just as I kept watching more and more wide receivers, I just felt a little bit better about the other guys' floors. Because like I said, there's just a few things missing with Trey Harris. So number one's going to be the injury. Missed the second half of the season. And because of that, he didn't really get to show us what he could really do against legitimate SEC competition. So like a lot of these incredible things he was doing that he put on tape, it's good to know it's in there. But he had like over 500 yards in 3 games in those kind of like layup games that the SEC teams schedule, you know, like Furman, Middle Tennessee State, Georgia Southern. Like he just ate against those teams, and that's great and all, but that only does so much for me with all due respect to those programs. He did go against Kentucky, had a good game against Kentucky, so it's not that he wasn't going to keep playing great and, you know, be a Blitnikoff finalist and have a 17-yard season and get himself into the first round. It's just we didn't get to see that, right, against top competition. And then you look at the pre-draft process here, I was really hoping he was going to be healthy to go out and run routes at the Shrine Bowl. He wasn't. That was a big box for me to check because of this next point I'm going to say with him, in that the role he played at Ole Miss was just rudimentary. 70% of his routes were go balls, slants, hitches, and screens. They had him on the DK Metcalf diet, if you will, of route combinations. And some of the 30% of the time when they did mix in some other stuff, he did just look more raw to me, especially running slants. I know it sounds basic, but there is very much a talent, especially for these X wide receivers, at running slants, bursting off the line, winning that kind of, box out position battle, using your size, attacking the ball, and just running those slants with urgency. it sounds weird to say it, but I was really underwhelmed when they had him run slants. You want him to be that kind of Michael Pittman, or Mike Williams was really good at this, burst off the line, use that size, win that slant on that big third down. They didn't ask him to do it much, but when they did, I did think he left a little bit to be desired. I will give him a compliment when they asked him to run dig routes. That was probably his best tape. Like I said, he's got some good deception in his routes, and he is a dangerous dig route runner. I don't want to take that away from him. But some of the other stuff as well, just not always knowing where he had to sit down against zones on some of his stop routes, just some of the overall awareness aspects of the position. He just kind of left a little bit to be desired for me. That again, just kind of made me raise a couple of these other guys ahead of him for the floor. But I don't want to undersell the ceiling. This is a guy that probably goes in the second round. I do think teams want to see him come out and be healthy at the combine, clear medicals, and, run well. I think he's got good speed on film. I don't think it's unbelievable or anything like that. So it would be really good if we could see him come out at the combine, hit a 4.42, prove that he's healthy. And if he does that, I would honestly probably raise Trey Harris up a little bit. And the main reason I'm doing this video first is I do want to provide an updated rankings before the draft, and Trey Harris has the best potential to rise up these rankings out of anybody. But again, the fog of war is just a little bit too much, whereas some of these other guys, I just feel a lot better about what we're getting at this point in time. But let's go to my number 11 wide receiver. We have another tie in the rankings, so 10B, number 11, however you want to slice it. But Jalen Knoll out of Iowa State, he's going to get that sort of slot pedigree, all your cliches about slot wide receivers, right? He's under 5'10". He's quicker than fast, though I think, as I'll talk about, his speed is pretty good. But he runs good routes. He's fully built at 195 pounds, so he can definitely handle the physical aspects of playing in the slot, catching the ball, knowing you're going to get popped, breaking tackles off the catch, after the catch. We have 2 or 3 of these guys every year that are just really sound, productive, kind of, third round, I would say, slot options. You think back to Roman Wilson last year, a lot of that with Jalen Knoll, but there's more to him than that. And why my pro comp on him is Jayden Reed is he actually has much more of a vertical skill set than those typical third round guys. And that's also why I have him as a potential second rounder with a second to a third round grade on Jalen Knoll. Iowa State really leaned into him as a vertical weapon. And you hear vertical weapon, a lot of people think, oh, you put him on the outside, you run a go ball, you catch the ball over the shoulder and outrun the defense. Not so much with Jalen Knoll, right? He's not a burner. I think he's fast. I think he runs, low 4.4s. I projected at 4.42 to 4.45. But, he's going to get absorbed by some of those bigger corners out on the perimeter a little bit more. But you stick him in the slot, that route running shows up. If you want to run, out and ups, that Iowa State did that a ton with him, where you fake an out route and then you turn up field and leave the slot corner in the dust. Slot fades. You can run posts. You can run deep crosses. There are really creative ways you can tap into a slot wide receiver's ability to threaten vertically if they're good at it. And Jalen Knoll very much is. He has as well, not just pretty good speed for a slot guy, good route running, but he has the same thing that Jayden Reed had, that I talked about with Tyler Lockett, where even though he's small, he has a really natural ability to track the ball in, catch it through contact, contort his body in and around defenders, and that body control down the field to haul in, really contested catches down the field, even though that's not what you think about with his game. So I really like the Jayden Reed comp. I think in terms of how good he is coming out of college, there's a ton of similarities and where he's going to get drafted and kind of how you project using this guy. Now, the main difference there is Jayden Reed has turned into a really special player after the catch for the Packers. I don't know that Knoll quite has that. I was a little underwhelmed with his ability to kind of set defenders up and, show that elusiveness, the contact balance. Even at 196 pounds, I want to see a little bit more play strength after the catch. But, I think Reed got better at that at the next level too, so you never know. But other than that, I mean, very similar prospects to another kind of Midwest, late second, early third round type of guy. Some pro comps are obviously better than others, but I do think you're talking about a contributor as a number 2 or number 3 wide receiver that's primarily going to play from the slot and give you a little bit of a fun vertical presence there as well. Really nice player, Jalen Knoll. And then my number 10 wide receiver, Jack Besh out of TCU, very much a recent high riser in this draft, tore it up at the Senior Bowl, and he's got a lot of people talking about him right now. He is just a really technically sound, big but quick wide receiver, and quick in the sense of foot speed, agility. I actually want to have a little bit of a sidebar, but it applies to Jack Besh in terms of kind of the difference between agility and change of direction. If you're kind of confused on what the difference is between those, watch Jack Besh, you'll understand. Change of direction, he's actually pretty stiff in his hips. His turns are a little more pronounced. Think of a semi-truck trying to make a turn compared to a sports car. That's your change of direction. But the agility, the machine gun feet, the ability to make a cut on a dime, always ready to use his feet as a weapon, that's something that absolutely stands out with Jack Besh, especially for a bigger wide receiver. He's 6'1", almost 220 pounds. He's a bully out there, but he is quick as hell, and it shows up in his routes. It shows up in his ability after the catch, his ability to make adjustments to the ball. It is really a rare combination of foot speed and size that he has that sets him apart from maybe like a Pat Bryant, who we talked about, who has kind of a similar size, catches everything type of profile. Best just has a little bit more juice to him in that way, but he does absolutely use his size in like every department, bullies people at the catch point, and after the catch, man, he's a ton of fun. He turns into just a pit fighter. Like, he is looking to brawl after the catch, and he might not be the most like explosive, dynamic guy after the catch, but he's gonna pretty consistently get you another 4 or 5 yards because he's just a type of athlete that defenders at the third level are not used to tackling. He's maybe the best run blocker in this entire draft. He catches everything. He had 1 drop in his final year at TCU. He only had 4 drops in his whole career going back. There's just a ton of different ways you can use him. I think you can play him on the outside. He doesn't have great speed to like stack corners or anything like that, but he can absolutely win on digs, comebackers, slants, that kind of stuff as an X, as a Z if you want to put him as a flanker. You can absolutely play him in the slot. He's more than comfortable there. Some of the route running, the two-way goes he can run, crossing routes. I just see a really high floor, good football player, a physical guy that it's going to be hard for him to not find a way into a starting lineup, I think. Finding a comp on Jack Besh is tough. I wrote down the love child of Jawan Jennings and Puka Nacua. Just a lot of similarities in play style with those two players and how Jack Besh plays. But yeah, he's a fun guy, and I think when you think about me being a little bit higher on this draft class or it not being as bad as people talk about, someone like Jack Besh kind of working his way through the woodworks to come out as a top 10 guy is a part of that. So late second round, early third round, fair game for me with Jack Besh. I think he's going to be a starter in the league. Then at number 9, I have Xavier Restrepo. I actually got the same grade as well as our number 8 player, but they're going to be very different archetypes, as we'll see. But Restrepo is another one of these really high floor slot options. Different than Jalen Knoll. Doesn't quite have the vertical presence, not quite as fast as Jalen Knoll in my opinion. But I do think in terms of playing with play strength at the position, being a bully over the middle of the field, being more of a physical slot, that's going to be more of Xavier Restrepo's game. And like, I've seen some people compare him even to like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm just not willing to compare these types in this archetype to St. Brown because he's just different in terms of pissed off all the time, and just, I swear he's built of just raw titanium in terms of just how strong he is relative to his size. But there is a little bit of that with Xavier Restrepo, right? Like, if he's running a slant and you're trying to, like, as a corner, you're a step behind and you might be trying to kind of cheat a little bit, maybe hook him at the hip or put a hand on his shoulder or whatever to slow him down. He can just give you one of these little shrugs and brush you off. Like, he has that type of play strength. And after the catch too, like, he will truck you. He runs through arm tackles. He is strong as hell. He's got all the other stuff you look for in a slot wide receiver. Really good route runner, put that on display at the Senior Bowl and all year at Miami. Really high IQ guy too. He was Cam Ward's dude. Cam Ward is known for the scramble drill and stuff. More often than not, Restrepo was the guy looking around, looking at the zone, finding the right spot to go so Cam Ward could get him the ball in scramble drill. Really consistent hands. I think just 2 drops in his final season. The floor is just exceptionally high on Xavier Restrepo. I put a Khalil Shakir comp on him. I think that's probably more realistic than the Amon-Ra St. Brown idea. Shakir has obviously carved out an excellent role from the slot in Buffalo's offense and is one of the better slot receivers in the league. I think Xavier Restrepo can reach that level in the big leagues, if you will. And then, like I said, I have the same rating here on my number 8 wide receiver, but a very different profile here in Alec Iomanner out of Stanford. Young guy, declaring as a true junior, but you wouldn't know it from his film. He is extremely savvy, extremely technically sound. You get through the film and you just see a guy that you say, yeah, that's going to be a starter in the league for 10 years. That's obviously a dangerous statement to make around draft time. But man, he moves really well for a bigger guy, 6'2", 210 pounds. He's got the burst to kind of pull away from press coverage, to create separation at the top of his routes. He's got quick feet. He's got oily hips. He can turn. He can bend. He can contort at the catch point. While his speed, I think, is more limited, I think he's probably about a 4.5 speed type of guy. He did have some long runs after the catch that I wouldn't be stunned if he is able to run at the combine. I was bummed that he didn't end up going to compete at the Senior Bowl, but this is a guy that if he comes out and runs like a 4.44, he could certainly climb in these ratings. But I don't see the long speed as spectacular. When he was running go balls and stuff, you didn't see a ton of the ability to kind of stack corners on the outside and that kind of stuff. But overall, just a really balanced, fluid, quick athlete with size. Excellent hands, plays through contact, really smooth and physical after the catch. Like, worst case scenario, he's going to be a lot like his old teammate, Michael Wilson, who ended up going, I think, 3rd round to Arizona, but became a starter very quickly. Someone that isn't the fastest guy, but very similar profile in terms of the route running in the intermediate game, a great weapon on digs and hitch routes, good ball skills, tough, smart guy. Like, man, the floor is really high. But because he is so balanced and really smart for such a young player, I wouldn't be stunned if he becomes a really nice starter, something like a Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's kind of a common comp for someone like this because he is one of these receivers that was never that fast, but just because of his physicality and his technique and awareness at the position, just ascended to like heights that you didn't really expect for a 3rd round guy. I do think Iomanner goes higher than the 3rd round. But again, on like an absolute best case scenario, could he have a Keenan Allen-esque career and you look back on it and he had 8,000 yards, caught 70 touchdowns and was just, a key player as a number 2 wide receiver? Yeah, I could absolutely see it. So another guy that I just didn't know too much about heading in, but definitely like the tape and think he's pretty safe for a 2nd round pick. And again, if he runs well, maybe he could sneak into the late 1st. But now let's talk about my number 7 wide receiver, a very polarizing one, right next to Trey Harris in terms of the hardest receivers in this draft to really get a beat on just how good they're going to be. And that's Isaiah Bond out of Texas. And the pro comp kind of speaks for itself there. Low-end comp, complete bust, Jalen Reagor status. High-end comp, legitimate impact-making speedster Jalen Waddle. You know, there's a lot of negative energy with Isaiah Bond transferring to Texas from Alabama. Saban leaves, he leaves. Never really clicked at Texas. Him and Quinn Ewers just couldn't really get on the same page. A lot of throws where it was just like, I don't really know what to make of this, where the ball's going left and Isaiah Bond's going right. A lot of those miscommunications hurt the ability for Bond to be productive. And frankly, as the season went on, they just started to use him less and less, especially as someone like Matthew Golden broke out. So I get it, right? Like, there are people that are not going to like Isaiah Bond. But I do still see a ton of upside in him. I think there were actually some exciting flashes on tape as well. And I do go back to Alabama a little bit too. I thought he was really special his sophomore year at Alabama. I remember watching him there. And by the way, just a side note, I'm not going to be able to show you guys film on the Texas guys. Those clips were getting blocked from sharing with you guys. So you just have to take my word for it on the Texas guys. Can't quite back it up with the film here, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm split on Bond. I really am. I think he's got a lot to learn at the position. He's super young. I think he's still 20 years old. I think he turns 21 in April. But he's got a lot to learn in terms of trying to pace his routes a little bit. He's not like some of these deep threats, though, where like they struggle to throttle down and change directions. That's part of where the Waddle comp comes in, because something that makes Waddle so special is not just the speed, but the ability to change directions, accelerate, decelerate, be shifty. There are only a certain amount of athletes that can move like a Jalen Waddle, and Isaiah Bond really can. Like, there's a reason he's hyped. There's a reason he's declaring after such a down season. Guys that can move like him just don't come around every year. So that's all in there with him. And like I said, I think he needs to learn how to weaponize that better in his route running. I mentioned a lot of the miscommunications. You know, I think a lot of that is going to fall on Bond, where he just wasn't sitting down in the spot and zone where Quinn Ewers, who has run this system obviously for multiple years, was expecting him to be, or in the vertical route tree as well. I can only imagine Texas had two-way goes built into their offense where Bond is supposed to read the safety and either run a post or keep it straight. And just, man, felt like almost every time Quinn Ewers tried to connect with Isaiah Bond, there was a miscommunication on the play, and you are probably going to put that on the young wide receiver that just transferred there over the kind of veteran quarterback. As low as I am on Quinn Ewers, he probably was in the right more often than not. So I think the way he paces his routes, showing a little bit more awareness to not always run at full speed, pace those routes a little bit better. He needs coaching and he needs time on task. But there are a lot of flashes where he can run just brilliant corner routes, get open deep with the speed. It's not that he can't run routes. He just needs to keep working at stuff. The other thing with Bond is I do think he has ball skills. Not a ton of drops on tape. There are some moments when the deep ball was in the right place where he shows some body control, the ability to track the deep ball. I think it's in there. He, again, just needs more time with the, working with a quarterback, hitting the jugs machine, that kind of stuff. But I don't see your typical kind of speedster track background type where sometimes they fight the ball a little bit too much and they can't track the ball. I didn't necessarily see that as a problem with Bond. Now, you'll see some pretty brutal grades for like catch in traffic and catch radius. Yeah, he's small, he's tiny, and probably never going to be a guy that wins a lot of contested catches. Certainly can get a little bit better at it, though, just kind of playing through contact at the catch point. He had a brutal contested catch win rate of 25% in his career, and that's damn low, especially at the college level. And then run after catch as well. He's got football instincts, right? He's natural with the ball in his hands. He'll juke you. Not going to break a lot of tackles once defenders get their hands on him. He's probably going to go down. That comes with the play strength element, but it's all in flashes with Isaiah Bond, and I'm still kind of willing to take a gamble on the guy inside the top 50. First round is rich. He would have to have like a Xavier Worthy type of, 40 to crack the back end of the first round like Worthy did. But I don't know. I understand if people don't like him. He is risky, but I also think he declared for a reason. Someone's probably going to take a chance on this guy, and maybe a fresh start in the league could really help him hit his upside, which I really do think something like a Jalen Waddle, which people are going to freak out when they see that name as a high-end comp. Let's be honest, Jalen Waddle's had some ball skill problems, has had some limitations with his size. He's had a hard time clearing to become like a legit number one wide receiver himself. So it's I think a good high-end comp, but the low end is, he just doesn't quite grasp everything at the position, and he's a Jalen Reagor type that's just drafted off the athletic potential and never really hits. But let's jump to my number 6, wide receiver. Couldn't be any different. Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. We got a couple of Cyclones making the list here today. If you're familiar with Drake London's game, you can get a pretty good grasp on Jaden Higgins. I don't think he's quite as twitchy as Drake London. Drake London has like rare foot speed and is just like nasty after the catch. I think he's a little bit stronger than Jaden Higgins. So it's not like a 1-for-1 type deal. I don't know that Jaden Higgins is going to be as good as Drake London, but just in terms of like how they play, the way they move, how you use him, he's diet Drake London. Again, some pro comps are better than others. This one, you really feel it watching Higgins because, like Drake London, Iowa State would put him inside and out, play him on the outside, play him in the slot. And Higgins isn't like a lot of taller, kind of X type of wide receivers where they're stiff and have slow feet and can't really turn and, don't have like the most flexibility in their movements. Higgins does. He's got light feet, runs really good routes, separates extremely well at the top of his break. Now, he doesn't have the speed to like consistently pull away from guys. That doesn't just include like running a go ball on the outside, but that also applies like on crossing routes or on a dig route. He might snap off his route, create separation for a few steps, but NFL corners are probably going to be able to tighten that gap. So you do want to get him with a quarterback that can throw with timing, throw with anticipation, make sure you're hitting him at his break where he is creating separation. But as long as you can pair him with that, I think you're going to have a very productive number 2 wide receiver. He's got everything you look for in a big wide receiver in terms of hands, catching the ball through contact, making spectacular catches down the field. He uses his size really well to kind of push off before the catch to create a little extra separation. But, even at the top of his route, if he's running a slant or a dig, he's good at creating offensive pass interference to create separation in a way that it won't get called. He's also just like a super productive guy, had 2,000 yards total over the last couple of years. He's got 28 career touchdowns. He transferred up from Eastern Kentucky, chooses to go to Ames, Iowa State. Like, he's got that football pedigree. Like, he just cold weather, rain, sun, whatever. Like, he just wants to be on the turf. Really just an incredibly high floor, a lot to like. I love the comparisons to Drake London. Again, I don't think he's quite as efficient. I don't think he has the same play strength. I don't think he's quite as quick. For example, Drake London, his final year at USC, 30 missed tackles forced. Jaden Higgins, 15. Still a good number, but like Drake London's just like nasty after the catch. Higgins is just kind of smooth. He'll sidestep you, he'll make you miss, but he's not quite the bully, I think, overall that a Drake London is. But beyond that, like really close comparison. I would take him inside the top 50 is where I've got him right now. We'll see what he runs. If he could even hit like just 4.5 flat or 4.49, I might be thinking more first round for him. When he really gets moving, he has some long strides, and there were some good moments of speed on tape and then some other moments where he felt a little bit slower. So I don't have a great beat on just how fast he is. Getting that 40 time could potentially get him into having a first round grade. And another guy, again, you talk about people saying this isn't a good wide receiver class. Jaden Higgins is a damn good wide receiver. And I think someone's going to walk away with an impact starter with a top 50 pick. And that really is a nice transition as we get into the top 5. I set this up earlier I really like the top receivers in this draft. I think I ended up liking all of these guys really more than I anticipated based on some of the things people are saying about these guys at the top. So number 5 for me is Matthew Golden out of Texas. Saw that he declared. I remember seeing him make some plays in the college football playoff, but kind of a high riser that I don't think a ton of people really expected to come out and be in this class. So that again is like kind of dropping a bomb onto the narrative that this isn't a great wide receiver class. I think a first round caliber prospect entered the mix there. But you watch his tape, I totally understand why he declared. Even though he's a younger player, was only at Texas for a year, he transferred up from Houston, and it's not like he was a dominant player at Houston either. You know, he had 900 yards, 13 touchdowns in 2 years at Houston. Like, he was productive, but this wasn't a guy that like dominated a lower level of competition, then transferred up. You know, he had to kind of fight for his time at Texas. Obviously kind of a meeting of the roads between him and Isaiah Bond as well. But as the season went on, he became the dude, man, especially into the college football playoffs. He ends up with 8 catches for 162 yards against Georgia, 7 catches for 149 yards, and a touchdown against Arizona State. A little more quiet in the Ohio State game, but he did have kind of a beautiful highlight, one-handed grab through contact in that game too. But again, just really kind of a late emerging potential star player here. But like I said, you watch the tape, you understand why he declared. He's got good size, 6 foot, 195, and the athleticism, the movement skills are that of a number 1 wide receiver in the league. A guy that has the speed to threaten deep, but just crazy acceleration to run short to intermediate routes. He's really nice after the catch for that reason. I actually give him an elite A+ grade for acceleration. His 0 to 60, like first 2 steps, the ability to hit top speed, it is just a constant weapon for him. That helps him get off press as well. You know, everything about his game is just a little bit less refined. But I do think he has like good feet, a good starting point with his release. But when he's right, when he puts the right technique out there, he can really pull away in those first couple of steps. So you see a guy that's going to create separation. He's going to be dynamic after the catch, can do it to all 3 levels. That's just an awesome starting point. And then you get to some of the catches he makes, the flexibility as an athlete he has, the ability to kind of contort at the catch point, make one-handed grabs, twisting back one way. He had pretty good success actually playing through contact. You know, he's 195 pounds. It's like average size, but he plays tough. He doesn't really let contact bother him down the field, whether it's at the catch point. And even times in his routes, he was able to run through contact, and that's where that acceleration helps in those shorter areas when people are getting a little bit grabby as well. He had a few drops. He had, a few, some routes I would just say look better than others. I think he's one of these young kids that like really enjoys the footwork aspect. The TikTok routes is kind of a meme going around right now in the football analysis world. But I think he enjoys that aspect of it, right? Like he likes to be the guy that snapped off a corner route and broke a guy's ankles. But I do think there's some routes where he needs to cut out some of the nonsense. And I think some coaches should be able to do that with him, where it's like, all right, we don't need 5 steps against off press coverage. We just need you to get to this spot on time. Like there's still some stuff to work on with him, obviously, but man, I was super impressed. And the player he actually reminded me the most of is Devonta Smith. Smith's a little bit lankier and a little bit more unique. But, as we've talked about with Devonta Smith, he plays more like he's 190 pounds. He's just the Slim Reaper, right? I think if Devonta Smith was actually 190 pounds, like he plays as, that's kind of the upside projection with Matthew Golden. And we know the player Devonta Smith has become. So that's high praise. He's got to put everything together still. But on a low end, I saw a lot of like Romeo Doubs, fluid, good route runner, has some frustrating drops at times, has some, less consistent moments at times. Like that's probably a worst case scenario for Matthew Golden. Look, if Romeo Doubs could stay healthy, he's still a nice number 2 wide receiver. So even though his, he's a little more raw at times, I still think his floor is pretty damn good. So I was really impressed, would absolutely take him in the first round, and again, is contributing to this class being a little bit better than it gets credit for. But next, let's talk about my number 4 wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka out of Ohio State. Really a different story than Golden. Golden kind of surprising a lot of people, declaring after his third year. Egbuka, I think, surprised a lot of people when he didn't. He's a guy that's been in the spotlight for a long time. I still remember him back in that rotation with Stroud and JSN and all these. I mean, he would have been back with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave as well. So he's been around. I love that he decided, though, to come back, have a better year than he had in his third year where things just didn't line up for him. But come back, have a productive year, and then, of course, win the national championship, that teammate mentality. You just got to love that. And another scenario here where, I was familiar with Egbuka, but I ended up liking him after watching the film more than I thought I would. He's just such a safe prospect, man. And there's going to be some obvious parallels drawn between Emeka Egbuka and Jackson Smith-Njigba, who came out 2 years ago, first-round pick, out of Ohio State, played in the slot. Going to be a lot of conversations like comparing those two guys. I didn't expect to like Egbuka better than I like JSN, but I actually have a slightly higher grade on Egbuka than I do on JSN, but very much in that same ballpark of just like super high floor, primarily slot weapons that I would absolutely take in the first round. Now they have a lot of similarities, smart players, good hands, great route runners, a lot of similarities, but they do have some differences too. And JSN actually isn't my pro comp for Emeka Egbuka. I have supercharged Jacoby Myers. I actually think Egbuka is a little bit more explosive, a little bit more burst. I think he's a little faster than JSN was. So I think that really shows up in his run after catch. He's just able to generate a lot of force after he turns upfield because within his first steps, his acceleration is really as good as it gets. So I see a little bit more burst and explosiveness from a guy like Egbuka compared to JSN coming out. Meanwhile, I do think JSN was a little bit more smooth, and I think that helped him actually like be a little bit more of a flexible, like crazy catch potential type of guy. JSN, you can throw him a slot fade, and he can contort and make a one-handed catch and have a lot of flexibility. Egbuka, on the other hand, probably not going to go outside of his kind of catch radius, if you will, to make a lot of spectacular catches. So there are differences there. But honestly, what gives Egbuka a slight nod over JSN as a prospect for me is I actually think Egbuka has a little bit more potential to play on the outside because of a little bit more speed and that burst. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba, if you stick him outside and try to have him stack on the outside against bigger, faster NFL corners, he kind of gets absorbed and swallowed up on the outside. I think Egbuka, he didn't have a lot of opportunities to do it because of how he was used at Ohio State, but I actually think he could step outside and play a little bit more on the outside. And that again, is part of where that Jacoby Myers comp comes in. Myers primarily plays from the slot, but he's actually done some stuff on the outside too because he does have, decent length for more of a slot guy. So I think for Egbuka, you do draft him expecting him to be a slot player, but I do think he's good enough on the outside that at least if you're in 2 wide receiver packages on earlier downs, he can absolutely play on the outside. And if he shows you a little bit more out there than he got the opportunity to show at Ohio State, maybe he does surprise us with being more of an outside presence. I think that profile is much more there than it was with a Jackson Smith-Njigba. Not to obsess about comparing those two players, but I do think it's a fascinating conversation that people want to hear about because it's so fresh. And again, these guys are both going to be first-round picks out of Ohio State, all that. But yeah, man, I really liked Egbuka. Super high floor player. Would take in the first round. Then we have at number 3, Luther Burden, another guy that people are kind of talking down. I've put him at number 8 in a couple Panthers mock drafts. Panthers fans have said they're not a fan of that. I watched the tape and I'm like, I don't really get why you're not a fan of that. This dude is insanely explosive, has crazy potential. My pro comp on him is DJ Moore at the next level. Now, he had a down year, his final year at Missouri. His quarterback play was complete ass. But, a lot of people had him as number 1 wide receiver heading into the year. He had a great sophomore season. And to me, I didn't see anything on tape that led me to be worried about why his production dropped off in his final year, other than just they weren't able to get him going down the field as much. But Burden just checks so many boxes. I mean, he's a remarkable athlete. He's fast, but he has incredible twitch. He has elite acceleration, in my opinion. There's a few guys in this class that have it. He's one of them. He can, change directions. He's got quick feet. He runs good routes in that way. But you see all of that on display after the catch, where he led all of college football in missed tackles forced. He has not just crazy shiftiness and burst, but he's 5'11", 205 pounds. This is where some of the DJ Moore comp comes in. He's got contact balance. He's got play strength to break through arm tackles and fight for tough yards as well. There's nothing wrong with his hands. Good consistency in terms of drops. He's back-to-back years above 50% on contested catches. I think he fights for body positioning, plays through contact pretty well. Doesn't have the biggest frame, He's not going to be mossing guys down the field all the time necessarily, but he can jump, he can elevate, he can high point the ball. He has some really special catches on tape, hauling it in over the shoulder, one-hand catch type. In fact, he's just off the top of my head, I think he's almost an identical build to what Antonio Brown was, just in terms of athletes and size. There's a lot of that to his game as well. That'd be pretty crazy to compare him to Antonio Brown with how good of a player he was. But other than that, man, it's tough to find things to really nitpick about Luther Burden as a prospect. I understand the production dropped off. One thing I think he could be better at is being more QB friendly. Working back towards the quarterback. If he runs a hitch route, he'll kind of let the ball come to him. I think there were some jump ball opportunities where he did kind of leave his quarterback out to dry, not really making a play for it. Those are legitimate criticisms, but do I think it's going to hold him back at the next level? No, I don't. I wish he was a little bit better as a run blocker. He has a tendency to reverse field when there's nothing there. There's a couple times where he would go all the way back around and have those kind of hero ball moments. To be fair, he ended up getting positive yards every time, but might run into trouble if he's doing that in the pros. I really like him, man. I really, really do. I don't know if I sold Panthers fans on him being an option and play at number 8, but I would love to see them be able to drop that kind of explosiveness into their offense or any offense, really. I think he's a true potential difference-making wide receiver whose floor is not as bad as some people are making it out to be. And, if we're comparing this to last year, so Burden comes in at wide receiver 3. I've actually got a higher grade on him than I did on Rome Odunze. So, that's a nice kind of parallel to last year. I had a 6.8 on Odunze. I got a 6.85 on Burden. These next two guys aren't quite going to reach the Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors territory, but they're up there. They're phenomenal wide receivers that in a normal year would be in the conversation for the number 1 wide receiver. But I've got Travis Hunter number 2. That's mostly because I'm super high on Tet McMillan, which those that follow me on Twitter are probably expecting that. But Travis Hunter is super exciting in his own right, and I'll keep reusing this point. I didn't think I was going to like his wide receiver tape as much as I did. I hadn't watched his film too much. I had seen some broadcasts and stuff, but back when I watched him in December, along with Shadur, I had kind of heard, he's better at corner than he is at wide receiver. He's probably going to be a corner in the league. And I'm watching him at wide receiver. I'm like, I don't know, man. He's pretty freaking good at wide receiver, dude. I don't know. Maybe I was just late to the party, but I see a lot of CeeDee Lamb in Travis Hunter's game. Now, I don't know that he'll ever be as good as CeeDee Lamb because I do think Travis Hunter plays both ways. And I do think there are aspects of his game where he just lacks a little bit of polish. I don't think he runs crazy technically sound routes. I don't know that he'll always be able to develop that elite chemistry with a quarterback if he's kind of playing a little bit more of a situational role of wide receiver. That's something that I just genuinely have no idea how that's going to play out. But I would say if he just focused at wide receiver, forgot about corner, which again, I don't think it's what he's going to do, and just really grinded at wide receiver and improved some of the overall technique, that it's just almost impossible for a 21-year-old to be a super technically sound wide receiver when you're playing two sides of the ball. But if he did, I think you could be talking about a legitimate alpha CeeDee Lamb type of wide receiver, because I see a similar athlete in terms of just the fluidity of movement, and he's fast. Maybe not quite as fast as CeeDee, but not too far behind, I don't think. But his ability to just stop on a dime, turn, the quick feet, the way he can elevate for the ball, contort his body in midair, he is just a truly generational overall athlete. And I don't think that's controversial to say with Travis Hunter, but I think it really shows up as a massive strength in two specific departments of being a wide receiver. The ball skills are unbelievable. His ability to high point the ball, he just is just so natural. Like, he doesn't have drops. He's slender. He's 6'1", 185, but like a CeeDee Lamb, he can go through contact and make crazy catches. And not just the crazy catches too. Like, he will win body positioning, when facing the quarterback too. I couldn't believe he converted 64% of contested catches over the last 2 years. So, like, that's a strength in his game. It's cliche, but he really is just a football player. When the ball's in the air, he's going to find a way to make sure he comes down with it. And then, likewise, this kind of idea that he's just this rare overall athlete as a football player shows up in his run after catch as well. He just is so natural with the ball in his hands. He's elusive. He breaks tackles. He's got pull-away speed. You see a ton of the same shiftiness that works for CeeDee Lamb, where, he catches the ball, he turns around, and the way he's able to kind of set guys up, make them miss, and get another 6-7 yards consistently, it's very similar. Now, he's not perfect because he is slender. I do think in his routes, and just it's his route running and ability to separate overall that I think just could deserve to get better. I think some of it is the technique with his feet, some of the just time on task, awareness aspects of running routes. But I do think he does get bothered by contact in his routes. He doesn't get bothered by contact at the catch point, but if guys are kind of floating a hand out there, slowing him down with their hands, he is slender, so any sort of contact is going to disturb him more than some of these other receivers. But I want to see him learn how to kind of hand fight in his routes a little bit better too, because there is room to get better there. Again, there's just aspects of technique that he still needs to learn at the position, but that would be a knock. I think the run blocking is interesting. He is not someone that grades out well as a run blocker, but I did see in certain moments he could run block. It's just, again, he is a little more slender, so there's that. But dude, he's playing 100 snaps a game. Like, he's got to catch a breather at some point. So, if he were to just focus on wide receiver, like I don't think it's an effort thing necessarily. I guess it technically is, but it's not for a lack of that he doesn't want to run block. It's just like he's got to make a sacrifice somewhere, and I think the run blocking is probably where that showed up. But obviously just a special wide receiver prospect, and that's before we even talk about him as a corner. I will have a separate grade on him as a corner, and then when I eventually make my final big board, which it's going to be a while because I'm just going position by position this year, he'll have like his own grade as an overall player, which very well might be the number one player in this draft, even ahead of our number one wide receiver. But that's a good transition to number one, Tet McMillan, my number one wideout. I'm just really stupid high on this guy in a framework where everybody likes him, right? I see an elite NFL wide receiver, you guys. I wouldn't be surprised if Tet McMillan also ends up my number one player in this draft. I'm just blown away. And it's crazy because last year I said that both Marv and Neighbors were the highest grades I'd ever given wide receivers. Jamar Chase was the other guy that was up there. He kind of missed the opportunity to have an even higher grade because of the opt-out in his final season. But other than those three, Tet comes in number 4 for me. A 7.2 grade, which is a legitimate blue chip, like top 3, top 5 pick caliber player. I've thrown some comparisons to Justin Jefferson around on Twitter. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I ended up settling on AJ Green as a pro comp. He's just a special player for the position. He's just so unique in the stuff that he can do. And I want to come back to some of the parallels to Justin Jefferson that I see with him. It's tough because he's 4 inches taller than Jefferson. He doesn't have the same burst and speed as JJ. How could he? He's just a different physical profile. But so many times in the way that they move as these kind of lanky, long striding athletes that are also just like really have quick feet and are really fluid as well, I think the way they move is very similar. I think obviously the ball skills, this idea that when the ball's in the air, Ted McMillan, Justin Jefferson, they're going to find a way to get that ball, whether it's contorting their body, elevating over a corner, one-handed catches, whatever it needs to be, just truly elite of the elite ball skills. That is where the Justin Jefferson comp really comes in. And then in the way that they move after the catch as well, I see a lot of similarities. That's what's crazy about Ted McMillan. A lot of people compare him to Mike Evans. Look, Mike Evans, as great as he is not a threat after the catch. He's stiff as a board. He can't really pick up his feet. Ted McMillan is crazy, crazy fluid. You know, he finished tied for 3rd in college football in missed tackles forced with 29. That's right there with Luther Burden. That's where like Drake London was coming in. And that's another comp you'll see a lot is Drake London. But the thing is, Ted McMillan is a lot faster than Drake London. He can pull away from DBs. He can actually be more of a vertical threat than Drake London. So he really is like, I feel like we've already spent too much time on like pro comps, but he is kind of like the perfect blend of Mike Evans and Drake London. I ended up settling on just saying, okay, well, that's AJ Green. And by the way, I think there's a jaded history of just how good AJ Green was in his prime. He's a guy that dealt with a lot of injuries that kind of slowed him down too soon. But I mean, a healthy AJ Green is a top probably 10 wide receiver of all time, just in terms of talent. So I think a lot of AJ Green when I slap that comp on Ted McMillan. But again, he's just special, dude. There's such a long list of strengths. We've already named a couple of them, but I think he's a really good route runner. Doesn't get enough credit for that. A lot of people say he's slow in his routes, but he's just an excellent route pacer. He kind of jogs into his routes on purpose because he's going to set you up, and he paces his routes. And when he wants to turn on the burners, he will. So he's got a lot of nuance. The foot speed really shows up in his ability to stop on a dime, run a hitch route, to break inside on a dig. He's great at running slants, getting off the ball. I think there's room to continue to improve his release technique. I think it got better from sophomore year to junior year. He's just a little bit of a bully at the line. He just assumes that he can just kind of throw his arms and lose you. And teams very rarely dare to press him anyway. But I think there's even more room to improve his foot technique and his release, but he's very good at beating press coverage. He'll run double moves down the field. He really has every route in his bag, which is why I struggle with the Mike Evans and Drake London comps, because if you put those two guys together, you've got every route in your bag. But Drake London's not a vertical threat, and Mike Evans can't do all the quick-hitting short stuff and snap-off routes the way Ted McMillan can. So to be this size, to be able to threaten to all three levels, to be such a good separator, to have unbelievable hands, to be awesome after the catch, there's just really not much missing with him. I think there is one fair criticism that could show up as an issue at times for him, is he does struggle sometimes dealing with contact within his routes. He is a lankier, taller player, so a lot of these corners will resort to just kind of sticking their hand like up and under his chest, and it is a tough leverage point for him to get through, and he doesn't always have the burst to break away from that. I think he could continue to get even better at kind of fighting back, at hand fighting. I think we saw some more gains in that in his junior year, but there is an opportunity for him to be a little bit more of a bully down the field so that he doesn't get hung up on contact. Because you'll see that once or twice a game. He's running a crossing route and a guy kind of gets stuck attached underneath him, and he doesn't quite get open. So like, that's a criticism. I hear people on that, but it is not enough to bring down the rest of the profile, right? I guess the other thing is his effort as a run blocker left something to be desired. He could be an absolute bully in the run game. Maybe they can get that out of him in the pros, but I really do think he's an elite blue chip prospect with legitimate potential to be a top 5 receiver in a league that is just loaded with exceptional talent at the top. And I obviously don't say that about every prospect. So we'll see. We'll see if I'm just stupid high on Tet. I know there's a lot of different opinions on McMillan. I've seen people with him as low as wide receiver 3, more of a mid-first round type of guy. I couldn't disagree more, but obviously only time will tell. It's what makes this so fun. That was a lot of fun breaking down these players. It's one of my favorite positions to do. Hope you guys really enjoyed. Again, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss any of these positional breakdowns. Please do hit that like button if you did enjoy. Help get this video out to as many eyes of draft fans as possible. Let me know in the comments down below. Do you think any players were snubbed here? I think Tez Johnson is a guy that a lot of people are going to bring up. By the way, Tez is wide receiver 16 for me. Just didn't quite make the cut. Surely we'll have an opportunity either in another rankings video or maybe an episode of the Fully Inflated Football Podcast to talk about Tez and some other guys. But yeah, let me know if you think guys got snubbed, if I'm too high, too low on dudes. But that's all we got. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Peace out.